Um, so I make this trip 1 or 2 more times. I come back up the hill into the building, and this is a regional event. So there's kids from like all over Western Kentucky, all there. Um, and it's very popular because basically it's you basically have a free day off from school. You maybe have like 5, 10, 20 minutes of actual things that you're doing, and then you just got the day off. So why wouldn't you go, right? So there's people everywhere. I run down, come back up, walk into the building to go watch my friend at her duo, and the building is completely empty. When I left, it was completely filled with kids. And now it's just totally empty. So I go up. So I'll go up to the room where my friend is, kind of freaking out. And I'm looking at the paper, I'm looking at the schedule, the schedule for the room where I know that she's supposed to be performing, and I have my watch on, which is also weird because I didn't usually wear a watch, but I was nervous about making my appointments that day. I look at my watch, it says 1:45. I look at the schedule, it says 1:45, my friend's name next to it, and there's nobody, nowhere, anywhere, not a sound, nothing. So I think I went up and down the stairs a couple of times trying to find anyone, and there was nobody. And then I decide at some point I'm just going to walk to the other end of the building and just kind of see what happens. So I do that. I get to the other end of the building, and then I finally see some adults just standing there, and I'm thrilled to see anyone. I walk out the building, and there are all my friends that I came with, and they're getting on the bus, and it's 3 o'clock.
Yes, and many children see them too. About 75% of the world's children today are being born with etheric vision. And when your children talk with people and have daydream playmates, the chances are they are actually speaking to some of these people, because these angels or angelic forces, or nature spirits as they're often called, will often make themselves seen.
Whatever it is, it looks every bit like a fairy and very little like anything else.
But seriously, it kind of looks like a fairy. Just kind of doesn't look like your standard mall.
I know that the paranormal is real. Listen.
But I wasn't going to make this video until I looked a little bit closer and I realized after it lands behind my bench, it disappears. And it just vanishes. And in fact, I went outside to look, to try to find it, to see if it was trash, to see if it was a bug, to see if it was a leaf, like trying to figure out what it could be, and it was gone. It just vanished.
What's that? Yeah. What's what? Yeah, look. Right up there. Insect or something.
Is that an insect? Let's have a look. What is it?
I don't know. Oh my god!
Ugh.
What happens to people who cut down fairy films?
Did you see it? Huh? Did you see it?
Yeah, me and him saw it.
What'd you see?
It was like a big creature.
A big creature?
Yeah, like around 10 feet tall.
I'm not going to BS you guys. One of my partners said they saw something fall out of the sky too, so that's why I'm kind of curious. Did you see anything land in your backyard?
The paranormal is real. Is it? The paranormal is real.
Welcome everybody tonight to Fascinating Fae. This evening, we're being joined by Ren from Minnesota. Ren, how are you feeling this night?
I'm feeling great. How are you?
Just getting over the flu, but honestly, really excited to have my voice back because I've been waiting to talk with you for some time. I'm really interested to collect your story here today. Really privileged and honored to collect your story, I should say. As we sort of move through this conversation, for the audience listening, for yourself, Ren, a reminder that occasionally I like to give at the top of the show. This podcast is a passion project that is started because I saw a fairy. If I were starting the show today describing my fairy encounter, I would sound strange at times. I would sound hard to believe, hard to understand, hard to contextualize at times. And so I have a lot of empathy for people that are sharing difficult to describe experiences. With all that said, we are not here on the show to convince anyone of anything. This show is not a scientific instrument. It's not engaged in research. It's the best way that I've managed to feel brings truth about the existence of fairies, the phenomena of fairies, and information that is associated with those stories to light, is to hear people's stories. So with all that said, it's an extreme privilege to bring Ren on because Ren has some experiences that start to go a little deeper than just an encounter. Both Ren and I have experienced some interesting components with time associated with our fairy encounters. And so Ren will be talking a little bit about some missing time and the implications of that. Ren has also seen some lights, fairy lights in particular, moving between the trees. And all of this comes together in a very interesting narrative, which Ren has been really generous enough to allude to as we start this conversation together. So Ren, what I'd like to do then, with all that anticipation built, and with all those caveats given, which are really the two most important parts to me doing that intro, what I'd like to ask you to do, if you would be so kind, if you would be so brave, if you would be able to just walk myself and the audience plainly into your experiences, please. Just let us know as much context as you feel is necessary. Start from the very beginning, as early on in the day or as early on in this event process as you like. And then if you could, please, Ren, just walk us into your experiences.
Sure. So what this is for me, it's a series of events that happened roughly between 15 and 21-ish, right in there. It all started with a lost time event when I was 15. And I grew up in rural Kentucky. And anyone who's familiar with Kentucky and some of the paranormal stories that happened there, I grew up about an hour from Hopkinsville, where Edgar Casey was doing his thing, and yeah, it's a strange area overall. So a lot of weird things happen along that line between Hopkinsville and Eastern Kentucky, which you can find all sorts of other stories about. But that's where I grew up. I'm also gay, which is relevant, which isn't necessarily relevant to the story, but is relevant in the sense that I was always like on the borders, on the outside of society anyway. So, and I think that it definitely comes up later with some of the experiences that I had in this like 5-year period. The starting point was a lost time event at a school trip to the university, Western Kentucky University in Bowling Green, Kentucky. It was a solo and ensemble band event because I was a band nerd in high school, and it was an all-day trip, and I only had one event around 11 o'clock in the morning, and then I was just hanging out with my friends all day. And somehow somehow I ended up being the gopher because there were a bunch of us were down at the student center and the event center where all the solo and ensemble events were taking place was at a different location. So somehow I ended up getting roped into making sure everyone hits their appointed time. So basically, I ended up running up and down the hill at Western Kentucky University. And at one point, I'm running down the hill, and that by itself is very strange because I'm a chubby band nerd. I'm not an athlete at all, you know. But somehow I'm running down this hill and running back up it, despite not being physical or particularly athletic at the time whatsoever. So I make this trip 1 or 2 more times. I come back up the hill into the building, and this is a regional event. So there's kids from like all over Western Kentucky, all there. And it's very popular because basically it's you basically have a free day off from school. You maybe have like 5, 10, 20 minutes of actual things that you're doing, and then you just got the day off. So why wouldn't you go, right? So there's people everywhere. I run down, come back up, walk into the building to go watch my friend at her duo, and the building is completely empty. When I left, it was completely filled with kids. And now it's just totally empty. So I go up. So I'll go up to the room where my friend is, kind of freaking out. And I'm looking at the paper, I'm looking at the schedule for the room where I know that she's supposed to be performing, and I have my watch on, which is also weird because I didn't usually wear a watch, but I was nervous about making my appointments that day. I look at my watch, it says 1:45. I look at the schedule, it says 1:45, my friend's name next to it, and there's nobody, nowhere, anywhere, not a sound, nothing. So I think I went up and down the stairs a couple of times trying to find anyone, and there was nobody. And then I decide at some point I'm just going to walk to the other end of the building and just kind of see what happens. So I do that. I get to the other end of the building, and then I finally see some adults just standing there, and I'm thrilled to see anyone. I walk out the building, and there are all my friends that I came with, and they're getting on the bus, and it's 3 o'clock. So we went from 1:45 to 3 o'clock pretty fast. Definitely faster than an hour and 15 minutes because I went up and down the stairs like twice, and then I walked across the building, it's not an hour long to get across the building. And I got on the bus. I told my friend like something really weird happened, but she, not that she dismissed me or anything, but she was like, yeah, that's weird. Let's go home. So yeah, and that was basically the end of that experience at that time. But it ended up kicking off a whole other series of events, and the Lost Time event ends up coming back around much later on when I actually decide to look further into it and partner with a hypnotherapist to take a look at it. And that's when it turned from a Lost Time event into a fairy/UFO event. It's very strange.
Okay. Ren, obviously I would like to ask you to take us there to where you said this eventually goes as you partner with a hypnotherapist. Before we do, I just want to thank you for that storytelling. Really riveting to hear you explain those details. One thing that I just want to make sure I understand correctly before we move on, and I know that we're going to have a chance to revisit this Lost Time event in detail greater than what your conscious is remembering for the purpose of the storytelling. So I really appreciate the distinction between the approach to the event from the two perspectives. the perspective of this is my teenage self experiencing this. Here you are being really good at sort of capturing that for the audience listening and for myself. So just staying within that framework for a quick second. The gopher situation had been working okay up until this glitch, if you would, around your friend at the 145 mark.
Mm-hmm.
So when you are coming from the last time you did it and you're coming back, what's the gap in time between those two? Just as clearly as you can remember, right? Because there's a disappearance of the audience and everyone associated.
Mm-hmm.
How in terms of real time that you can remember, I guess the question I'm asking, sorry to stumble over my words there, is what was the distance in time between when everything was normal and then when everything appeared to be strange?
Approximately, from what I can remember, approximately 45 minutes. I remember it was after lunch, we ate, and then somewhere around 1. And honestly, I'm not even sure how the gopher thing happened. I cannot remember being asked to do it. I just remember it came up somehow. And then I just started doing it for some reason. I mean, at the time, I remember just being a little bored. Because all we were doing is just waiting. We were just waiting for my friend's next appointment, which was with the 145 appointment. And then somehow it came up that a lot of like people in my group or the group I was in were still down at the student center, and a lot of them had appointments, and somehow I ended up gophering somehow, which was not a normal thing for me to do. I wasn't like a leader or any kind of like. I wasn't any like cultural leader within the band group at all. I was just the quiet kid who played drums, and that was it. And then somehow I ended up running up and down this hill a couple of times, and Western Kentucky University kind of sits on a hill. That's why they're called the Hilltoppers. It's not like it is a proper steep hill. It's not like a gentle hill at all. But I did that like 3 times, and yeah, and then everything happened.
Thanks for going back and making that distinction. It just makes me wonder, like, was there enough time in the initial perception of things being weird for the audience to have cleared out? But as I was asking that and hoping that you might give some context that might say, oh, okay, the audience cleared out, I immediately remember they're all supposed to be there at 1:45.
Yeah, they're all supposed to be there.
Mm-hmm. And that's when you're experiencing the look at your watch, the look at the paper, the look at the empty room.
Yeah, where's everybody? There's no one in the hallways. There's no one in any of the other rooms. Nobody.
Thanks for allowing my logical and critical mind to be entertained there with that thread of questioning. And it would appear that as I was asking it, I answered my own question with remembering the details, which totally answer it. So I mentioned to you when we were speaking offline, sometimes I will ask something you've just told me, and it's no offense meant. It's just part of the process here. And I think I feel pretty confident about my understanding of what's strange now. And that's what I was hoping to arrive at. So thanks for that extra effort to help me arrive at what's strange here. I totally get it now. I fully understand. Now that we've sort of covered the real time, if you would, memories of your 15 to 16-year-old self, and the joke has to be made. This is definitely an incredible story for one time at band camp. American Pie jokes aside, I don't really know what I actually think about that movie, but it's such a popular culture reference that I had to. With the tension broken, with a little joking, which I don't usually do because I take this quite seriously, and I don't joke to cast any shade on the truth here. That I believe you. What I would like to ask you to do then, if you could please, Ren, is now transition us into this next sort of level of the experience. And if you could get us there by just answering this question for me and taking it from there, what made you decide you needed to have a hypnotherapist to look at this event?
So years later, so let me think here. So years later, probably like 5 years ago. Yeah, about 5 years ago, I started becoming more actively spiritual, and really kind of pushing myself to sort of start engaging with the world in a more active way through ritual, magic, astrology, tarot, things like that. I've always been doing these things, but about 5 years ago, I thought, you know what, I'm going to do this seriously. And when I started doing that, one of the things that came up is that because I knew I had this weird event, and I realized that every time I thought about it, I would assume that it happened when I was in middle school. Like that was my memory. My memory was in middle school, I went to solo ensemble, and this weird thing happened. But the problem is I didn't know my friend who I was with until high school. I never met her before then. So it couldn't have happened in middle school. It had to happen in high school. And then between those two, that conflict of memory was like, I think this might be a lot more than just something weird that happened. And it took a couple years, but eventually I sort of found I found a hypnotherapist who was involved in similar pursuits that I was into, so I felt comfortable with him, and I partnered with him, and we did a session.
Okay, and so that's very interesting that the friend who you recall, is this the person that you're referring to that you spoke to on the bus at the end of your original story portion?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that. I just want to make sure that I'm listening properly. So this is someone you didn't know in middle school. Very interesting. I can see why that cognitive dissonance around such a very referentially like complete detail. Like you would know when you knew someone. That's something you can pick apart for fact.
Mm-hmm.
Being the cognitive dissonance portion of that presence meeting a memory of a time frame in which that person's existence predated your knowledge of them. That's a trip for sure. So now I understand why you've gone in for the session. Could you please take your time and be so kind as to give the audience a look at that session? What happened? What did you learn?
So we're about to get weird. Things are about to get weird. So I go in for the session, and so he takes me in, and I'm pretty easy to hypnotize because I'm already used to like meditation, and getting in an altered mental state anyway. So we get in there, and so the first thing that I wanted to do, because I have experience of being a ritual magician, I told him that I wanted to establish like, kind of like an imaginary like sacred space first. So we had like a jumping off point. So we went through that first, and that turned out to be really useful later on, because as we started walking through the memory, it turned, at least what I experienced through the session, is the last time I made the trip down, I saw basically a UFO in the sky, and it just sort of mesmerized me, and I apparently ended up sitting on a bench on the path down, and then once that took place, these mantid beings showed up, and basically they were taking me for some sort of like checkup. That's the only way I know how to describe it. But the thing was that the UFO was basically like was a lure, right? And really where they were taking me was down beneath the earth. And I want to stress this wasn't happening physically. This was happening like mentally, astrally, if you want to call it that. Physically, I was just there. Apparently, I was just there on a bench, just sitting and zoning out, and that was it. But apparently, I was taken into this cavern below there, where I was like checked up on or something like that. But these mantid beings were using like the UFO metaphor of some kind, some sort of like visual metaphor as a interaction point between myself and where they exist. Does that make sense?
Ren, a couple things. First of all, I do want to say it does make sense, and I'll build on that. I don't want to just say, yeah, that makes sense, because that's insufficient. I said a couple things. So the first thing is just I can really sense that, not that you're second guessing every word, because you are telling me and the audience what happened, but I know that feeling, and I know that sound in someone's voice who's struggling to give voice to difficult to describe things. And so I will say again, this is where my empathy for this particular moment in any person's storytelling really kicks in, because I'm the same way when I say my stuff. It doesn't sound exactly rational, but when you say, does that make sense? Here's what I will add and offer. I think, and I'm just saying I think because I'm definitely not an expert on this subject matter. Going back again to the fact that who am I? I'm just a guy that saw a fairy, but I am doing this podcast and I am getting to hear everybody talk who has had these types of experiences. And that does give me something of a privileged position. I hear 10 stories for every one that makes it to air. Mm-hmm. But again, I'm a critical person even of my own beliefs. And so I know the difference between a fact and a belief. And I actually make a distinction really often in the show. I believe you and I believe your story. If you were to tell me right at the same time you're telling me the story, and this is the mechanism by which it occurs, and here is the mathematical principles at play, and here's the 5-part course where you can learn how to unlock the same experience, then we have a problem. But it's okay to not have the words for it. And so when I say it makes sense, here's what I would offer, just as part of what you've told me. The astral, the etheric, the magical, because you mentioned that you are a practicing ritual magician, and I do want to ask some stuff about that later, not right now, but magic, quantum physics as a way of understanding just the strange nature of reality, like the duality of light and other things. All of this, in my opinion, is language sets and language subsets that at various times have been developed in order to explain the same phenomena, which is, I think we are surrounded by a multi-dimensional framework, which is real in the same sense that our dimensional framework that we're living in and accustomed with is real. And so saying that you're sitting somewhere physically, but that you are also elsewhere, can be a difficult concept to grapple with. However, what I saw with my fairy entered from its reality and ingressed into mine physically. Like it did that so that I could see it with my eyes and ears. But I was also perceiving it on a level that was beyond my eyes and ears at the same time. And in the duality of my fairy sighting of both physically seeing it and then supernaturally perceiving it simultaneously, it was communicating to me something about the nature of their capabilities. I have since heard from dozens of people that, and I want to say maybe no one who has specifically had your set of detailed experiences to recount, but I have definitely spoken with people that have had things manifest in their room, or they themselves feel that they have traveled elsewhere from a stationary position. It's often the room, but not always. It's sometimes like you're describing out in the open on a park bench. So there's a lot to unpack, but just to kind of tie it up with a bow and then allow you to move on with more of this story, because I don't really want to talk, but I do want you to know that when I say I get it, I do. And I hope that by building upon what you're saying, you can feel more comfortable proceeding on, because I'm kind of here to help support witnesses a little bit as well, who might not have had a chance to tell this story before in a friendly environment, who might not have even contemplated some of these aspects more deeply themselves. So anyway, just to kind of wrap up, I think you can be sitting on a park bench. I furthermore think that fairies shapeshift and perception of a fairy energy, or let's call it a energy being entity, is very nuanced. And the idea that they're arriving in your 15-year-old brain in a form that you can accept but also simultaneously recognize as unusual, such as a spacecraft and mantids, as a veil, if you would, for what's really going on, can be understood from this logical breakdown. The fairies are reaching out to you. They do not want to basically blow your mind in its entirety. They may either be presenting themselves as they are, and you, because you have never seen a fairy before, are doing this blank filling in yourself of the mantids and the spacecraft, or they have some sort of outreach capability that helps present those visual stimulus to you when they're not really there. Either or is possible, but both are predicated by the fact that a fairy is messing with your self at a astral, ethereal, magic level, whatever the case may be. So here you are now being taken down, and I think I understand why, and I understand how you're explaining the sort of confusing set of reference points that you just sort of launched into this story with as part of the discussion of your regression. So if you could then, so now as you're perceiving this, and thanks for letting me add to your narrative here, I don't like to talk during people's interviews, but if you could go on, that would be amazing.
Sure. So basically the results, the essential results of the session, there's basically, apparently I have fairy DNA, which wasn't exactly like a new idea for me. It's something I had considered, because I was born with a cleft palate, which according to folklore, that means, you're not quite human. But the story that was told to me was basically I have an ancestor who's not human, and basically they have to come check up on that DNA every so often, because it's kind of like uranium, because it's in a place where it's not naturally from. So they literally have to come in, like, do like a check, or some sort of weird check on the DNA uranium or something, and that's crazy. That's really crazy. So yeah, and that's kind of where the session kind of ended up, after we kind of got through it all. I remember right at the end, the guy I was working with, prompted me to ask, the mantis beings, what is their right, to do stuff like this, and the response was, well, we're the gardeners of the earth. We have every right, because you're a plant, meaning us. You're like a plant to us, meaning us humans. We're just a part of the Earth's multi-dimensional ecosphere. So yeah, and that's where that ended up, and that's crazy to think about. I think there's probably some truth in there, but it's hard to. I think it's unhealthy. I think it's, well, let me rephrase that. I think it's healthy to hold on to that information, but keep it in that sort of like off to the side. This is a weird thing. I'm not sure what to do with it, but it's important. So I'm going to keep it over here in my experience and see what comes of it. So.
Thank you for explaining the insights arrived at through this hypnotherapy session. I am very interested in regression hypnotherapy, and it's really interesting to talk with you. The reason I'm interested is because in my fairy encounter, the whole thing appeared to last like 3 seconds in real time. Mm-hmm. Now, I used to manage bands, and I'm a musician myself, and I'm like just an auditory person. I like how music sounds in particular, and I like how people sound. As part of doing this podcast, one of my big pleasures is I get to hear unique voices right in my ear, intimately. It's awesome for me because I'm an auditory person. And so I know what my girlfriend and I were listening to when the ferry came in. And when it exited, the part that is tripping me out, and it's like this detail that just can't be confirmed but also can't be forgotten, is I want to say I'm absolutely certain, but then I'm just like, I don't really know, because the thing happened so fast. But it was like, as it came in, we were listening to Catch a Fire, and as it left, which again is 3 seconds, there was advertisements playing, and the next music that came on was the whole album that we had been listening to had passed, possibly even more, because we were just on to other depths of my playlist at that point. But as we were coming to, and she and I clutched each other and we were freaking out, what was that? That took over everything. I didn't stop to think about the music change. But I have wanted to have a regression hypnotherapy session myself to unpack what is going on in my encounter. Because here's the thing. I got so affected by that I've now started this podcast. And I'm doing every bit of my best with every fiber of my being to treat the subject matter seriously, objectively, and skeptically, but also just trying to say, okay, I watched the leaf fall to the ground. I don't know what gravity is right now, but I definitely see the leaf fall to the ground every single time. So something's doing that, right? So I'm there, right? And you and I and others have had phenomena that aren't like gravity that everyone can see. It's phenomena that we personally, or in my case with another person, thankfully, but in many cases personally, are experiencing alone. So the reason I wanted to just sort of talk about hypnotherapy, having never done it, when this is happening, are you recording this session and then later listening back to it? Can I also ask, if you're hypnotized, are you recalling these details because of what I just said, or are you recalling them from sort of a waking memory of what you're talking about as it's happening?
There is a recording of the session. And I've listened to it one time. I didn't pick out anything. Nothing sprung out to me that I didn't remember from the session. During the session, I remembered pretty clearly the whole process, but also I'm also used to guided meditations and using visualization as part of my practice. So I was kind of ready for it, So I don't know if that's everyone else's experience. I did have some fairly interesting bodily sensations when I was going through the process. I felt my body warming up and cooling down at some points when I would hit a particularly emotional point in the experience.
Having again never had a regression hypnotherapy session, or a hypnotherapy session for that matter, in which I'm being asked about stuff. I've had them once or twice as a result of my injury recovery process. I had a hypnotherapist help me feel my feet to the ground, which is something I was struggling with after my spinal injury. And, we did a hypnotherapeutic multi-session process of visualizing my feet to the ground in various formats. And it helps because the brain is actually controlling a lot of what's going on outside of what, the muscle tissue is actually telling it. So it helped. But I've never had somebody ask me questions as part. So I just, my last question around the hypnotherapy session would be, I guess as you're listening back to this recording or as it's happening real time, what would be the narrative person that stuff is are you telling a story it's happening to you? Is he asking you, okay, and what happened next? And you're oh, this happened? Or is he asking you more you today to think back? How exactly is it functioning, if that's okay to ask?
Yeah, it's sort of in between those three things. He's guiding me where I need, he like walks me into the state, or he'll walk you into the state. And then once you're in there, once for me, once we kind of got past the gateway of the normal memory, I was pretty much just going with it. I was pretty much describing. He would ask clarifying questions every so often. At the end, toward the end, when I was at a point where I could, where I was experiencing a conversation with this mantid being, that's when he dropped in with questions, because obviously he was curious as well. Um, uh, and that was a little bit more like, him like sort of guiding me to ask certain things that maybe I wasn't able to think about at the time in the session.
Ren, thanks for letting me ask all those questions. I'm genuinely fascinated, which is why I'm asking them. And so I appreciate, having the chance to talk to somebody who's both had an experience and then had hypnotherapy to help unpack the experience. It makes me feel a lot more comfortable with trying it myself. This might be a big ask, and so I will say right away, don't worry if no. But if even a portion of that is a recording you still have access to and would be willing to share with me, I could, through audio editing, tuck a piece of that hypnotherapy session here into the episode tastefully. So I'll just leave that. I'll just leave that with you to consider. And it'll be a surprise, because if the answer is no, then we'll just move on and nothing will happen. If the answer is yes, and right here in the audio will be this cool little extra bit.
So I meet him at the edge of the forest, and he's there looking the same.
Yep.
You gotta get on the back of his horse thing himself. Feels like he's made out of wood. And we're rushing through the forest. Everything's blurring. And we're on campus. At least what my version of it.
Yeah. And what's happening there on campus?
I'm remembering walking down the path, and I'm observing it at the same time. But there's a well. There's a well in the path. I'm gonna fall down the well. It's like I didn't see the well. Like I was running, and then there's like, it's not so much a well, it's just a hole in the ground. It's a hole that leads into a cavern. There's like iridescent light, and he's taking me down the hole. I'm kind of following like a vision of myself down the hole. Blue light, bluish green iridescent light.
Then what happens?
Essentially, I just tried to light my torch, and he said, "Don't do that." All right, so the hole opens up into a large cavern. There's a light source. I can't quite make it out. There's what I would describe what look like scorpions, but they're made out of rock. Yeah, there's some sort of crystal that's like beaming light. And that's like the light source. It's lighter over here and it's darker over here. Apparently there's two versions of this. There's this version, and then there's like a what I would describe as a UFO version. That's at least what's been communicating to me and being communicated.
How is it being communicated?
Just like telepathically.
So there's two versions, this cavern rock scorpion with a crystal in the middle. How big are these rock scorpions compared to you?
They're quite large. They're probably the size of, they're just there. They're not really doing anything. Other than just moving around. Like they're not like hanging, they're just doing their thing. But they're quite large. They're like the size of the horse.
And then the other version, the UFO version, what is coming through about that?
It's a prismatic, crystalline saucer basically, and it's like it's beaming light down into the cavern, like projecting.
And where are you in this experience?
I'm in the cavern. Well, oh, wait, I'm in the cavern myself. Rhett is under the beams of the light.
Hmm.
Hang on, I'm trying to verify something I just heard.
Sure.
So this is what I heard is this is activating fairy DNA.
Where do you hear that from?
It's coming in telepathically again. I don't know. I don't think it's coming from Buckthorn because it's not really how he's just a guide. He doesn't really talk, but it's just coming in ambiently. I think it's coming from the ship. The ship is I'm pretty sure the ship is actually like a being unto itself. It's like I can see an eye like on the bottom of it.
What else are you observing?
We're going through the cavern. I see myself sort of like running through the cavern with this light, kind of like a cone coming down.
Yeah.
I feel like something's like turning on. I can feel it like here. There's stuff coming in about the caves. Basically, there's beings in these caves, which is accurate. Yeah, something's coming in, being projected through here.
Thank you.
I can feel it sort of resonating in myself, but it's definitely like I'm seeing something entering into Brett through here. There's a wide open chamber. There's a river running through the chamber. It looks like there's carved statues on the wall, but they're not like they've been there a long time. It's kind of hard to make. It's hard to make them out. I'm looking both ways, or Brett is looking both ways. He's not sure where to go. He's running to the right. He's running. He's nervous or scared. There's clicking noises.
Yeah, where do they come from?
They're just coming. They're just echoing through the cave. And then we just walked out into a space, an open space, and that's where it ends.
Hmm.
It was like Brett was like walked out, like the cave opened up, walked out into like a natural space, and then he was just beamed up or pulled up.
Pulled up to where?
The saucer, and then he's just dropped like back in place.
And then what happens?
I'm still in the open space.
Yep.
Coming out of the cave. There's lots of trees, hills, mountains. There's a there's a house, a big house. I can see there's pathways. Buckthorn says this is he's kind of saying this is like the edge of the human world. Like to proceed any further, you're going into like specifically human imaginal spaces. All right, he's asking what we want to do here, basically.
Yeah, I'd love to take a moment and explore what happened to Brett when he went up and when he came back before we explore how Brett moved from this human imaginal space adjacency into the school space. So I thought perhaps we could use your capacity of seeing, your capacity as bird, the sense of hawk almost, to go up and up to see when and where and what happened to Brett in those moments. So allowing that to happen, what do you observe?
So basically, he's kind of in the ship, but not in it. Like he's underneath it, like right up underneath it. There's a beam of light that's sort of holding it in place. Things are being implanted in his shoulder. Or in here.
How do you see that? How does that happen?
So the vision kind of flips back and forth, back into the cavern and onto like the saucer. But so on the ship, it's like a table. There's like a surgery table, and there's like needles, right, poking into into here. In the cavern, there's like mantis beings who are doing the same thing, but it's with their mandibles.
What is the purpose of this implantation?
All right, these are veils. I'm just going to give it to you as it's coming. All right, these are veils. They are meant to implant and release at times of stress. You agreed to this to set you on a path. This is your heritage. These are the pathways of the earth. I think they said this is a remembrance of ancestors, perhaps a remembrance of ancient ways or ancient paths. This is to bring the below to the above. Like right. This is me talking now. Like the ship is a projection from the caverns. Like how we project into the imaginal space, they're projecting from the imaginal space into the physical space. And they're showing me like the implants, and they're like opalescent almost. It looks like kind of looks like an opal scales almost. Yeah, iridescent scales, kinda. And I'm not using scales in a reptilian sense, but in a texture sense. Just to be clear on that one.
Thank you.
Because they reminded me of that one.
Yeah. So it was been said that these implants are veils to be released at times of stress to set you on a path. Are you on that path? Have they all been released? How has this progress unfolded?
Yes, no, with delays, but not unexpected delays.
Thank you. And anything we need to do with these scales or implantations?
Basically you meditate and you fill them with light from above is what you do, specifically aimed at them. And then they activate and integrate. Yeah, that's what you do.
Wonderful. Thank you. Wonder if we could do that now, a little bit upon the implantations. What do you observe?
So I'm kind of in two places. I'm at Delphi, and I'm also at back in my ritual space in the imaginal, in the field. There's a beam of light hitting the stone obelisk in my imaginal space. And then at Delphi, Apollo is meditating. He's basically showing me how to do it. And I haven't done it beside him yet. I'm working on that.
Thank you.
He's basically kind of like showing me how to do it. Yeah, we can do it a little bit here, but he kind of says that this has to be done like properly. It should be done underneath the sun or underneath the light of the stars. It needs to be done outside. Yeah, basically he said you call the fire of the sun or the fire of the stars, depending on your what time of day you're doing it. And you can do it with the asterisms, constellations. Basically what I'm getting at, basically what it does, it releases crystals into your body that allows you to focus light better. And it's just a matter of what kind of light you want to call in. Yeah, I don't mind sharing it. The only thing that might come up, and I don't know if this would be an issue. The guy who I partnered with, he used my account in a book that he wrote called Missing Time Found. So I don't see how that would be an issue, but I mention it because it might be an issue.
Understood. Well, I'm not The only issue for me is, generally speaking, I shouldn't say the only issue. Let me clarify that. I don't ever want to sound cavalier. I'm a pretty thoughtful person. I never want to reveal a guest's identity. That's my principal concern. And it's just out of safety, privacy, and security. So to what extent the recording can be included or portions, I'm a skilled audio editor. And later, when we move on from this audience portion of the conversation, we can discuss the logistics around that. But short version is that if you're hearing this, it's because we just spliced in some of Ren's amazing audio from his hypnotherapy session. Right on. So moving forward, okay, so cleft palate, fairy DNA, fairies underground. Fairies are known for being underground, which is I think in part where their Gaia association is derived.
Yeah. And I think it's more interesting that we see them as underground, because they probably don't see themselves like that. But I find it fascinating that for us, that's where they are, that they're underneath our feet. As if there's something about the fact that we're on the surface of the earth that's relevant in that concept. The thing that I often think about with fairies, the people who I think have like the story that I suspect is mostly true, is the Islamic story about the jinn. And so in the Islamic belief, there was never a war in heaven, like in the Christian belief, but there was a rebellion of the jinn, who were the original inhabitants of the earth, and they were people made of a smokeless fire, and they were lifted above. The story is they were lifted up by Allah and worshipped Allah, and then at some point Allah was like, I kind of want to make humans, and humans are made from mud or water and earth, so we're like mud people basically, right? And the jinn got really upset about it, and then that's when the quote unquote war breaks out. And the Islamic Satan isn't an angel, but a jinn, who's just basically like a nuisance here on earth in that concept. But it feels like the idea that they're like our older siblings, and in some way we became the favorites somehow. There's a wheel of truth in there that I keep coming back to, and maybe that's where that underground thing comes from. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, I just really appreciate like the depth at which you can communicate on this subject matter with me. It's really welcome. And like as punctuation to your own experience in storytelling, this is really cool. I do think that you're right with regards to like their placement as older brother or senior soul. They were here first.
Yeah.
Here's my expanded thoughts on what you've just said. I think fairies are individuals, so like they are just like us, like Bob and Sally. One thing you said about the description of the jinn just stopped me. I was like, I was having a sip of water, and it was when you said that they were made of a smokeless fire.
Yeah.
I hope that Monique listens to this episode, because Monique and I in episode 2 struggle to do our best to describe the visual encounters we had with our fairies. She landed on like continuously moving television static at the fringes. I've often said it was like reality deconstructing. I've often said it was plasmatic. I often say it was like an undulating, prismatic, plasmatic, effervescent. I've tried to use all these sparkly but yet contained words, and smokeless fire is just like bang on. It's like that would be the language given to it in an age before TV and digital screens. For sure, It would have been. Yeah. And that's like, I'm like, as you said that, all of my goosebumps lit up. I was like, that's what I saw. I saw a jinn. They're also called the Ngakero. I think I've probably butchered that name, but it's like the East Indies, Philippines, believe that there was a previous race of fairy people, fairy humans like yourself, potentially, including and up to a fully inhabited fairy city that was extremely technologically advanced, a la Wakanda from the famous depictions of modern day, and that storytelling of the Ngakero, I think is how you say it, city, is not really that old in terms of modern storytelling. It just goes back, like the last time someone who's on Earth reported seeing it was 1850s, not all that long ago. So I think you're right. I think that like there are more souls on Earth that are highly developed than just human ones. And I think that if we are honest about living inside of our own bodies day to day, and if someone's listening to this podcast, they're probably interested in some degree of the esoteric, right? That's otherwise they're listening to this because they're a skeptic and they want to laugh at me.
Right.
Either way is cool with me, but we all know what human experience is. We feel stuff. We have love. We know that that's a feeling, but you can't, put it in a bottle and say what color it is or how much it weighs. We know what ourselves are. Like we wake up every day and there we are with ourselves, but it's totally not measurable. It's an ethereal or ephemeral part of ourselves. And that is part of the truth here, is that these entities that we're describing are not that different from us. We are, I think, the little brothers in the sense that like we're kind of more stuck in our three-dimensional selves while simultaneously participating in I think you said a multi-dimensional ecosystem, or I think that was the word you used. Really good way to put it. First time I've heard someone put it that way. And yeah, so I'm right there with you. That's what I think about it, to answer your question. Can I ask you some questions about like cleft palate and fairy DNA? That's the first time I actually think I've I think I saw that like once or twice in my research, but I've taken in so much information. Sometimes I forget stuff that I dismissed or didn't think was that important. But with you bringing this up, and as a person with this cleft palate, I'm curious, like, just tell me a little bit more about how that relates to fairy DNA. And then I'm just curious, like, what did the impact of learning you have fairy DNA mean to you? If you could, please, Ren.
So the folklore is specifically from Ireland and England and those places, and the idea is that if you had a child who was born with a defect, that it was probably a changeling, and your child got switched out for a fairy child. And that goes into this idea that fairy people have trouble reproducing, which if they're made of fire kind of makes sense. It's easier to replicate yourself if you're like if you're a muddy, sloppy human, right? But for me, it fills in a lot of holes, having that like mild conformation. I always kind of suspected it, but it explains why. So, dipping into my magical practice, one of the things I'm really good at talking to spirits of various kinds. It seems to be something I don't have any trouble with, versus other people who I communicate with who are also practitioners. They seem to have they seem to have a lesser range of communication, and I don't mean that in an insulting way in any way, but I seem to be really good at talking to things, that's one explanation for it. If I want to accept it, and I like half accept it, because I do get confirmation of that when I'm in practice and when I'm on journeys and things like that. But I also feel it's really necessary to realize that I am a human. I am in a human body. I'm sure I got a little bit of like fairy dust in me somewhere, uh, but I'm here to be a human and do human things, even though I have this other stuff happening inside me and around me. So, does that answer your question?
It does, and it actually makes at the end there a point that I really want to just sort of like amplify. So one of the things about my fairy sighting is it did not obsess me to the point where I'm just all fairies all the time and meditating all the time and trying to get back to the fairy realm all the time. I'm like Ren. I remember that I'm human. And everybody listening should remember that you're human too. Go floss today, do your laundry, sweep your house, stuff like that, stuff that you as a person need in order to succeed. Then we get the privilege of having these conversations. And I think that it's an important thing to talk about, because one of the things that I worry sometimes about making this podcast is there's a lot of like pretty mind-blowing or trippy information being tossed around here. And, not just in this conversation, but in all my prior ones too. And I'm out here saying to people like, yo, this is real. This really happened. But that's irresponsible of me to say, because if not, punctuated with the point you just made and that I just amplified, right? It's like, this is not all that's going on here is a crazy interdimensional thing. You should not just stop thinking about your job and your career and your relationships and focus only on learning about the multiverse. That stuff is absolutely fascinating, and go as deep as you feel. That's your choice. And honestly, I've gone pretty goddamn deep, but I also have my life prioritized and my ducks in a row, and I'm in a position where I can do that comfortably, right? And I don't want anybody here to be so excited, encouraged, and affirmed by listening to us and others, and that they go somehow, quote unquote, off the deep end or off the map as a soul who is also human. And actually, I think now that I've said that, I'll answer a little bit more fully. I think that there's possibly a true nature to human existence, far more mysterious and complicated than we really know. And the idea that we were created by God in a biblical sense, feel what you will about the church, and do your best to listen to those set of words objectively. God could be potentially, transposed for the word fairy / alien / interdimensional consortium.
Yeah.
And I kind of think one logical process that could be considered as a thought process for someone trying to wrestle with all this always boils down to the starting point of ourselves. Like I was saying a moment ago, we know that there's a soul in us that cannot be contained or seen but exists. And go back to that truth, and then think about what I just said, a consortium of interdimensionals creating a physical being with the same capabilities that they've got, almost like everyone added a teaspoon to the bucket of flour, and now we're just one really big interdimensional pancake.
Yeah.
And that's why it may be that clairvoyance and interfacing capabilities between ourselves and the magical, or ourselves and spirits, as you're saying, is a shared capability amongst people who some identify as fairies, some identify as, oh, I'm definitely alien walking around in here. I think a lot of people do know what they really are, or they maybe know that, like, if we're talking about interdimensional pancakes as an analogy, not every pancake turns out the same, right? Some are bigger, some are smaller. The first few usually suck,
Yep.
As we go, the pancakes get better. Generally speaking, the griddle hits that sweet spot. You figure out how the batter is behaving, and you're making them well. Not to say that anybody here is a mistake, because I don't really think creation produces mistakes. I really do not. I think that each person is how they are supposed to be, but I do think that some may be a little bit more fairy. Some might be a little bit more fully human. Some people might be a little bit more the ape that we started from, and some people might be a little bit more the Palladian who's beaming information down to them directly, and they might have that capability because of that DNA component. And someone was telling me something very interesting about DNA in an offline conversation recently, that it can be activated through the visual sighting of symbols. So like you have DNA, and if you look at a particular symbol, like an activation symbol, there are DNA strands which are invisible to science. Basically, they're outside of this dimensional reference point, but they're still attached to our same DNA strand structure. And it can be activated through visual symbols. And so someone was talking about like an event they hosted where they were showing some activation symbols to some people that had been sent to them telepathically from an intergalactic race. And in the event, most people had no response to the activation, but 3 people were behaving strangely, and later described that upon seeing these symbols, they each and independently described this outside of, because they didn't know each other at this event, and they were each interviewed after the fact separately. They each described seeing a starship visually in their mind, like enter their frame of reference, identically to what you are describing sitting upon the bench. And so there's something interesting in terms of story collecting that emerges, which is that you get enough people whose voice you can hear is telling the truth, saying the same or very similar things, and it just really does make you, like, I have that proverbial set of red strings to thumbtacks, all over my my pantry wall, but like when someone's trying to collect all the parts of a conspiracy and they do that mind map on a wall. I'm joking, but sometimes when you say, "Oh, I saw a ship in this way," and then I hear other people saying, "I was at an event and I got shown a symbol and I immediately saw a ship." If we are an intergalactic pancake mix, then some of the interfacing capabilities of a fairy and some of the interfacing capabilities of a mantid might be really similar, and also some of ours might be really similar. Yeah. Like I do think we can do some of the stuff that these things that are reaching us can do too. Otherwise, how are we making contact, right? And I think that in our case, as uninitiated experiencers, especially you talking about your lost time memory, we are not the ones initiating this contact. And so we have a whole set of things to wrestle with that come along with that. I also speak to people that do initiate the contact, and they are no less amazed and confused, but they are a little bit more willing to accept what happened because they definitely know that they started that conversation. And so it's really interesting, just to have this talk with you. And it's actually gone deeper than I maybe would have originally anticipated. And so I do really appreciate all the honest sharing just about yourself personally and with your thoughts, feelings, and insights. I'll get to this part, but I like to ask people what fairies are. The reason I say I'll get to this part is it comes at the end. But the thing that I usually say before that question is there is no right answer or wrong answer. No one knows. And you've done a really fantastic job of broadening my perspectives here. And that's why I like to ask all these questions. To move the conversation along, out of respect for your time, Ren, out of respect for the audience's time, with deep appreciation extended again for the amount of time and honesty and just plain honesty that you've shared with us. Really, really incredible to receive that. And I think everybody listening will agree with me, just in saying, big thanks to Ren so far. Now, the fairy lights in the trees sort of tie this narrative together to some extent. And I think the audience listening to myself have a really good understanding. You have this memory of 1516. It later presents to you as having a cognitive dissonance. Gosh, I will ask about the fairy lights in a moment, but the question that I forgot to ask is how were you able to reconcile the presence of your friend? Was it also something that you felt was a projected situation, or was it actually a later time that this event occurred than when you were 15?
I'm still working on that one. There's still like post hypnotherapy, that entire memory is squishy. would be the best way to put it. It's like a wet sponge. If you poke at it, it kind of bounces back and forth between most memories, but it's mostly the abduction memory now. So I and given that the experience obviously started before the abduction happened with the running up and down the hill, I'm honestly not sure at one point, quote unquote, normal reality stopped and the experiential reality began. Because at one point I was running down the hill and I remember feeling like I felt like I was floating, like somehow. And I can't quite place. I don't have a good timeline of like where the normal stops and the weird begins, and that includes my interactions with my friend. So I'm not sure.
Thanks for making that distinction, and I appreciate you're still working on it. I'm still working on some of my encounter as well, the whole 3 seconds of it. Anyway, if you could now please move forward to sort of complete the narrative that you introduced at the pre-conversation with me, and that I sort of introduced on your behalf at the top of the show. Just sort of tie in what this experience has to do in relation to the fairy lights, if any, and then just talk to us about the fairy lights. And if you could try to tie them together in sort of time. I know this event may have a placement in time that is at question, but I think the fairy lights seem at least chronologically associated to the two in relation to each other. So if you could just dig into that a little bit, that would be really appreciated.
Sure. So pretty much right after this, that summer, my family moved to a farm outside of the very small town that we lived in. And as soon as we moved to the farm was weird. Weird things were happening on the farm. It wasn't haunted in like a traditional in a traditional kind of sense, but there were things that were happening that were also out of time, or looking back, they feel out of time. Like, for example, the house sat at the front of the farm, and then there was the farm itself behind the house, and then the trees, a little forested area toward the very back of the farm. So, for example, if you were walking up to the house, you would see someone looking out the back window almost every time between 4 and 6 p.m., like consistently, even though there's no one in the house. And I remember at one point I stopped and stared at this person, and I saw them move, and the other members of my family saw it, and we went through the whole thing of trying to like going inside the house and analyzing, like, was it something casting the shape? We never came to any conclusions, but it was always there. There was also another strange experience where around that same time period where somehow I climbed into a tree. So there's like the physical again activating itself. And read a book of Norse mythology and read a whole bunch of stories that were not in that book. Because I went back later on to read some of those same stories and they were not in there. And then after that, so and we're progressing. This is not like a rapid series of events. There's months apart. So somewhere around 18 is when I started breaking away from Christianity and trying to reestablish myself in my worldview in a more healthy manner, because I was gay, and I was basically every day was basically a stealth mission where I grew up. And then once I started doing that, I started feeling. The only way to describe it is it was like a call to the back of the farm. Like I remember I'd be up at like 1, 2, 3 a.m. and I'd feel like I just need to go back there, and I ignored it a couple times, and then a few times I went back there and then nothing happened. But then there was this one time, I went back there once again, feeling that call thing going on, whatever that was. And I go to the back, and it's not a dense set of trees. It's actually more of a prairie-like environment with like trees, every 20, 30 feet or so. So it's fairly open. So I'll go back there, and it's at nighttime again. And there's this light that's sort of around the trunk of a tree, and it's glowing brightly. This is not like a trick of the moonlight or anything like that. It's a very obvious light, and it's around the trunk of the tree. It's probably like 6 to 7, 8 feet tall, or up the tree, and it's basically like a glowing egg around the tree. And I'm watching it, and it kind of slinks down into the ground and moves to the other tree and pops back up again, almost like it's trying to be like, it's almost like it's trying to hide from me, but for some reason I can see its aura or something like that. And I watched it go down and appear to another tree again, and I thought, wow, this is really weird. And then I turned around and walked back. So there might be more to that experience that I haven't poked at yet. Yeah, maybe that's the whole reason I ended up here today, was so I think more about that moment. The entirety of the experience, it was so like strange and obviously unusual, and then my reaction to it was like, that's weird, I'm gonna go back to the house now.
Thanks for telling us that additional story. I'm trying to organize my thoughts, because many are coming to the front of my consciousness here as I listen to you speak. One is a thought from I parked all the way back when you started talking about Kentucky, and you think you mentioned, for people listening who may or may not know the paranormal side of Kentucky, I hate to be this guy, but hey, let's just call it what it is. The person I spoke to last, who I recorded, was Susan from Kentucky. And then I decided the name for her episode was going to be Quantum Kentucky, because she was talking about trippy stuff going on in Kentucky too. So I do find it really interesting that you are, bringing that Kentucky angle again. And is this in Kentucky where you saw these lights, or is this still associated back where you were living previously? I know you're in Minnesota now, but I'm just trying to make sure that this is all happening in Kentucky as I say that.
Yeah, this is all happening in Kentucky, in the same region.
Okay, copy.
Yeah.
Interesting. And can you say the name of where that region was again, please?
Well, this is Western Kentucky. So I grew up in Russellville, Kentucky, which is about 30 minutes to the west of Bowling Green, Kentucky, which is where the college is, where I had the Lost Time event.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I just asked because Susan, who as a guest episode will come out pretty shortly here, she'll listen. I'll ask her later, hey, was Ren and you, in the same zone kind of thing? So that's why I ask. Now, can I ask you some questions about this light? And I know it's a brief sighting. The sightings of fairies physically in otherwise normal circumstances are usually extremely brief. And they usually are, when I have a chance to ask guests about them, it's usually revealed that there's some strange motion beyond what you've already talked about, that the light is even stranger than you already talked about, et cetera, et cetera. So if I may, can I ask you some more detail-oriented questions regarding this sighting with the light?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so also, I said I had a bunch of things come up. Here's the rest of them. Now that you've given me permission to ask you some more questions. I felt called, and I didn't realize it until you started talking about your backyard and feeling called to go out there. I went to the place that I saw my fairy. I went to that provincial park in my boat dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of times. I had this really super lucky event that I hope everybody listening gets to have at least once in their life, where I sold a business that I had worked on for 10 years. And it was just a life-changing amount of money. It was the right time in the world. I was operating medical cannabis dispensaries illegally, and then cannabis legalized in Canada. And so around me, my whole world changed, and I was now the belle of the ball, where previously I'd been a criminal. And so after I had that win, I bought a new boat, and I just took it from where I lived in the city to this place over and over and over again. Is my favorite thing to do. I would get out, I would walk, and then I when I got the chance, I would take friends or a girl that I was interested in, and in this case where I saw my ferry, this girl that I was with at the time, to this same place. And I realized, listening to you speak, I think I was drawn there over and over and over again too, because it's extremely beautiful and everything, but I mean, there's a lot of beauty here in British Columbia, and I was coming to this place daily sometimes, and it's not a small feat. You have to come in by water, and I was coming here, and I was coming daily. Anyway, that's very interesting to me that you described feeling drawn, and I really felt like I needed to share that with you, and just also for myself, so I don't forget that part. I'll listen back to this later myself. So yeah, I was going there all the time. Interesting. Now back to your encounter with the lights, and thanks for letting me in particular in this episode, thanks for letting me speak so much, because you've just had so much dialogue that needs just conversation around. So thanks for that. I usually do like to let the guests have most of the airtime. So when you're saying like an egg and around the base of the tree, can I ask some clarification around that? Do you mean as though there's this egg, let's call it the size of a football. This is just my own analogy here, okay? And a sapling or whatever is growing. And so this egg football thing, is it like sliding up and down, and it looks like the tree is in the middle of the football and the football's totally wrapped around? Or is this like egg out in front of the tree a few inches? I was kind of getting the idea that it was almost like the trunk was in the middle of it, and it was, both wrapping around and lit up around the trunk at the same time type of thing. But maybe I'm wrong. So that's why I'm asking.
No, that's correct. It was like it was around the tree, and sort of at first I felt like it was emanating from the tree, like the tree was just glowing tonight because it wanted to, until it moved, and then that's when I realized there was something more weird than the weird that I thought it originally was. Was happening. So yeah, it was just like iridescent. It was a white color, but it's the white color just as it starts to split into a prism color. It's right on that point.
Just to go back to the around the tree, can we say like an olive on a straw?
Yeah, that's good. That's a good visual.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I really want to make sure I got it right. So yeah, like an olive on a straw. Cool. So wrapped around the tree, and I see why you say emanating from the tree might have been a thought. Okay. And then about how big? Can you relate it to an object that we would be familiar with?
About as tall as a person. About as tall as a tall person. So it was 6, 7, possibly even 8 feet. I would say 6 feet tall. So it was big. As far as width, probably like 4 feet wide at its widest point.
And so how, starting at the base, and then how far up the tree did you observe them? Did you observe this light traveling?
It stayed close to the ground. It felt like it was more anchored to the ground than the tree once I saw it move. So it felt anchored to the ground. So it would sort of undulate like up the tree a bit and then come back down.
I understand. Thank you for listen. Again, it's so hard to describe the visual phenomena in particular and the motion in particular of fairy sightings. I would even go so far as to say there are many other energy-based beings that I think sometimes get lumped into the idea of fairy. Those things are equally hard to describe too. Doesn't matter if you're seeing an orb or a fairy with a bunch of like details. The way they move is hard to talk about, and the way it looks is hard to talk about. It's literally so hard to describe because you are doing a good job of describing what your eyes are seeing. That's not the hard part. The hard part is saying what you're seeing looks like.
Right.
Oh, I saw a thing move from left to right. Okay, cool. Describe it. Well, this is my favorite part of these shows, and that's how I know it's a true sighting. So I kind of get the picture. It's like a undulating light orb, light ball, if you would, that's from the base of a tree. Now, you did mention it was moving from tree to tree, and I do want to get back to this prismatic touch, like breaking point of white in a second, but can you just for a moment talk about it moving from tree to tree? Do your best. I know we just talked about how visually difficult they are to describe, but anything that comes to mind around the motion from tree to tree, how it was doing it, and any comments on the motion itself, please.
The motion was so it at one point it slunk down, and I saw the light move across like the grass and the ground and pop back up to another tree. And the way it moved was silky. That's the word that comes to mind. It's like a silky motion, almost too smooth for the environment that it's in. Like it's almost like it melted. It's almost like it melted down the tree, melted across the grass, and popped up the other tree.
Yeah, it's too smooth and too precise.
Yeah.
It's like you've done a fantastic job there, and I know you haven't listened to my show previously, and for the guests, Ren has not previously listened to my show, so you don't know that I say in just about every one of these episodes in which one of the fairies has been sighted, just confirming the guest with relation to my own experience. When my fairy came into the wheelhouse of my boat, it's different than yours because mine was flying. Okay, mine was about the size of an apple and brightly purple illuminated. But when it came in so precise and at the same time so silky and smooth. It was like, and one guest and I, a firefighter from Oregon, Brian, were chatting in one of the episodes, and we kind of came up with like, if you put like a laser pointer on a robotic arm, and then it was just like moving from point A to point B, there's not a lot of, it's just so smooth. It's just like, it's just really smooth. It's interesting to describe. And it's not that it's like smooth in a mechanical way like I'm describing. It's just so precise and smooth, and it's hard to find the words for it. So as it is popping up sort of between the trees, at what point does the light just sort of dissipate and you start to walk away? And then when you're done talking about that, I do want to talk about the color again, specifically on its own.
Yeah, so it moved to the second tree, and that's when I realized this was more weird than weird. And then it did it again to a third tree, and that's when it started to like dissipate, and it felt like the impression I had, it was like the light pulled away. Like if you imagine, going back to like the olive, imagine if the olive pulls backwards off the straw and then proceeds backwards, and it just slowly gets smaller and smaller in relation to the straw. It was like that with this. So the light moves to the third tree, pulls away, and it just sort of like got smaller and smaller until it wasn't there.
Very interesting. I had a guest recently give voice to the thought that they wondered if fairies were the mobilization of plants who are stuck in the ground otherwise, but do have a consciousness, and that if they themselves, the plants, were projecting themselves this way. I don't know if that's right or not, but it is interesting that you're seeing this in such deep association with trees. It's worth noting. It is worth noting. And going back to the concept of like fairies as a interdimensional energy being, both capable of shape-shifting and also having native form, a lot of people do see them represented as either some sort of extra special glowing part of an animal, of a plant, of a tree, and up and out from there, all the way through to like fully articulated butterflies, but that are just much bigger than they should be. It's really interesting what a fairy consciousness seems capable of manifesting. And it's funny because my very first guest said, quite casually as part of a longer set of things, they can show up as anything you imagine. He just sort of said it like a fact, and he just kept talking, and he just keeps showing up as right. Ron, shout out to Ron listening. So anyway, Ren, now let's talk about the light. So when you say white light verging on where it breaks apart prismatically, I think what I was able to understand there, and I want to be sure that I got this right, and I also say my thoughts sometimes so that the audience does fully understand the guest. So this is your chance to help me understand. Do you mean like, you know, a prism, like a glass triangle, for lack of a better word, right? A prism can demonstrate that a beam of light is actually multicolored, you know, and there is like a point at which where the light beam is entering a prism example where it's still white, but it's starting to break up. You can kind of see in some pictures of it even actually online. Is that what you're talking about? Like where it's white, but it's just starting to break into a prismatic hue, or were there more colors? I guess if you could just sort of talk about what you were trying to describe in a little bit more detail, I would really appreciate that so much.
Sure. I often think about gasoline, in the sense of like when you see gas on the ground and the light hits it, you see the different, you can see the different colors. It acts as sort of a liquidy prism effect. So that sort of like iridescence that you see in when light interacts with gas on the ground was sort of on the edges of the light, and it was like clearer than white, and it got more intensely white the closer to the tree. So it's almost like a luminous undulation. This seems to be the word for this event, undulation. A luminous undulation that, as it expresses itself further away from itself, it starts to break into this iridescent multi-light spectrum.
Yeah, I tried to describe it like looking at reality deconstructing at the fringes of it. Also, Aaron from Indiana talks about seeing entities that look like you're describing with the analogy he was using was like hot asphalt on a hot day. So same idea. And also the like you look across a bonfire at another person. That same visual distortion from heat. And it's interesting because what you're looking at when that's happening is you're looking at air molecules visually. You don't usually see them, right? Because they're not usually refracting light like that. But when they are, and you see them, it's a remarkable visual sensation. And so when you see a fairy, they're ingressing into our visual perceptive field. And one of the things that we can see, as I just demonstrated, is air molecules. And so I think we're seeing them. I think we're seeing the fringes of them coming into form, if for lack of a better word. I don't know that for sure. Again, I'm just speculating, but you're not the first person to describe that type of component. Also, Aaron's were like 4 to 5 feet tall in the trees.
Wow.
Multiple of them. Remarkable similarities. And going back to something I said earlier when I say I think fairies have native forms, like I think they can show up like anything you imagine, like Ron says. But I think that they are themselves, and when they're just here doing their normal duties, like I think fairies kind of have like jobs. Like one fairy's like, I'm checking on these trees, and maybe that's what you were seeing.
Right.
And another fairy might be like, I'm just going to see how all the squirrels are doing today. I mean, I'm really getting off into conjecture land, but I do think that when they arrive into our realm in their native form, they look like themselves. And that can be a bizarre appearance. It can be, like you said about the djinn, flameless, a smokeless flame. And now here you are describing almost a similar thing, right? So it's really interesting how that wavy, undulating, reality, fringy, messing with-y, I don't know. Just think about it. Think about it the best you can, audience that hasn't seen one. There's something going on when you see one that's like, whoa, what's up with that?
Yeah, the word I often try to describe it as, and this is from a more magical context, it's basically like it's radiation from a different level of reality. So when that hole opens up, all the stuff that's on the other side kind of pushes through with whatever else is coming through. And I often think about it as a radiation with whatever is coming through.
That's really well said. Like really, really well said. And I don't know that needs the caveat of a magic thing before that. That sounds pretty observant and remarkably scientifically based to me, and really fits the narrative that I think is the correct one, which is this can be understood. And I'll leave you with a final thought before I ask my last question. And then we'll be letting you go shortly thereafter out of respect for your time and the audience's time. So basically, with regards to the scene of the lights, now that we've talked about all the sort of visual aspects of it, you mentioned earlier that you just sort of turned around and were like, I'm going to go home. When it was happening, was that the extent of your emotional response to it, or was there any other feelings inside? I'm just curious.
I mean, I was definitely like, wow, that's really cool. But also mostly I was pretty numb from the experience, which automatically makes me suspicious, because that's not a normal. I shouldn't be reacting like that, right? That is a response of someone in shock when you have that numb experience. But that's what I felt. I was pretty chill about it. Thought it was cool, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go home now. Which now immediately sets off red flags,
Yeah, shock is not a unreasonable unpacking of that. And I used to be a first aid instructor, and I've gone through some pretty traumatic accidents, and I do know shock is real. Like, you should be reacting, but you're not reacting properly. And I've witnessed it in people because I'm a first aid instructor. When I see an accident or something, I tend to stop. And I've witnessed it firsthand. And, a person in shock is truly confused. Like, I once came across a man and a woman who had just had a motorcycle accident when a deer had hopped out. And she had a compound fracture. So her bone was sticking out through her calf, basically. And she was trying to get up and deal with the lipstick and purse and stuff that had got scattered. Because she's in shock. So she's not having a normal reaction to her leg being jutting out of her skin. She's concerned about something different. And it takes the form of what you're talking about. Like, you've just seen something incredible and you're like, I'm just going to go home. So, and I do appreciate you being able to look back at some of the elements of your experiences with still unresolved confusion, because that mirrors my position on my experience. And I don't think you're hosting a podcast and talking to 50 people a week about fairies. So if you're still confused about it, and I am, there's some brotherhood there. As I move to ask you my final question, and I do this with all guests that come on the show, Ren, there's no wrong answer here. There's definitely also no right answer. No one has a fairy in a jar on their counter. However, you've got some fairy DNA, it sounds like to me. And so you might be in a unique position as a person that gets asked this question, as I think you'll be the first person I've had on who self-identifies as either possessing fairy spirit or DNA. Though I've definitely had a lot of people who are hinting at it and still are afraid to come on. So my question for you then is, from your perspective, from everything you've shared, with no wrong or right answer really existing because no one's the authority, Ren, in your opinion, what do you think fairies are, please?
Ooh. All right, let me think about this for a second. Fairies are the first light of the stars that hits the earth and creates something with the earth. That's what fairies are.
Oh, wow. What a fantastic answer. Truly, the shortest and most beautiful answer I've received to date, my friend. Ren, if I can say a few words personally as I move to let you go here, and I usually, truly hand off the goodbye to the guest, and that'll happen here in a moment. One of the things that has come up for me, I'm a straight guy, I'm 44. You mentioned earlier that you identify as gay. So people tell me all the time, oh, it's really brave of you to host a podcast about fairies and to talk about fairies. And I have one guest whose episode has not yet aired, Alex, who's also a gay man. And he in particular is like, it's really brave of you to, host a podcast as a straight man about fairies. And actually I know bravery when I see it, because I have gone through tough stuff and I've had a interesting and challenging life. And I definitely know the difference between someone who's brave and someone who's putting on a face. And so just personally, I do think it is brave for you to self-identify as gay with all the connotations that like fairy and homosexuality have historically, to then also say, I have fairy DNA, and to bless us with your insights and your stories. That's the definition of bravery, in my opinion. And I want to thank you for that. And I just want to say that to you. And the same goes for Alex when his episode airs. He doesn't know this yet, and this episode will be out after his, but he says this thing to me at one point. He says, I just don't want everybody to not believe me because I'm gay. And the way that I build my episodes is I put a little teaser of someone's voice at the beginning to entice the audience to listen to them. And that's Alex's. And by the same measure that I don't want to be discredited because I'm talking about fairies, irregardless of who I find sexually attractive, the root is it's hard to talk about fairies. It's doubly hard to talk about fairies as a gay man and say I have fairy DNA and, do everything you've done here today so plainly and with so much, time and so much generous sharing. So you deserve to be acknowledged for that. And if no one else feels the same way, it doesn't matter. That's how I feel. That's brave. That's a brave person. All of my guests are brave. You're an extra level of brave. And I just want to, make sure that I took the time to say that to you. And so, I'll just sort of finish with some housekeeping here, and then and we'll let you sign off for the night. Okay. In honor of Ren's, excellent storytelling and sharing, taking this show and my knowledge deeper here at Fascinating Fae. If you've had an encounter with the Fae kind, if you yourself are identifying as having fairy DNA, either through your own intuitions or some knowledge that you've unpacked in a format similar to Ren, an experience you can remember, an experience you were helped to remember later with some support of hypnotherapy or otherwise, I guess what I'm getting at is bring your stories to me. Here at Fascinating Fae, I just want to remind everybody your stories are welcome. So if you've had something that you would like to talk about, reach out to me. My email address is encounters@fascinatingfae. Fascinating Fae is my social everywhere. Facebook, Instagram, it's where you can find me. And you can hit me up and start the conversation there. I'm really interested to hear from you. And I just really encourage you and thank Ren for being so brave himself here today, and hope that you follow his lead and let this conversation continue. So with all of that said, Ren, and appreciate you letting me do some housekeeping there. It is an important part of the process. I don't monetize this podcast, but I do want to keep it going, so I just want to remind everybody listening, hey, it's a two-part process. The guests have to come forward. With all of that said, my deep appreciations, I would like to say on behalf of the human and non-human audience listening here tonight, big thanks to Ren for coming on the show and sharing his experiences with us. Ren, if you'd be so kind as to say any final words and a goodbye to the audience, we can leave it there for the night. Thank you again for being here. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it.
I'm feeling motivated to share a little bit from a exchange with an angel. who, when I asked about the what's it all about, I was told that I was reminded that creation is incredibly huge, and we are very, very small, meaning us humans, and there's so much going on around us that's all beautiful and wonderful, and we should live in celebration with it, no matter how it arises in our lives.
Pretty pictures on the wall, plastic figurines. I saw the markings in the hall, in the stacks of magazines. I don't remember much at all, what I do is blurred, and everything I do recall I can't describe with words. With words! With words! With words! With words! There were children in the garden playing some funny games. I hadn't seen them yet before, but I somehow knew their names. I don't remember much at all, what I do is blurred, and everything I do recall I can't describe with words.